You think you know who to trust. You think, after decades of paying mortgages, raising families, and building equity, that your home is safe. You think that nice young man who helped you with the yard work would never betray you. But here's what nobody tells you about elder fraud. It doesn't start with a stranger in a dark alley. It starts with a smile, a favor, and a signature you thought was helping someone you cared about. By the time you realize what's happening, your name is already being erased from the deed to the house you've lived in for 43 years. This is the story of how I almost lost everything to someone I invited into my home, into my life, and into my trust. And if you're watching this, if you have elderly parents or grandparents, if you own property, you need to hear every word of what I'm about to tell you. Because what happened to me is happening right now, to someone just like you. I never thought I'd be the kind of person to fall for a scam. My name is Robert Chen. I'm 76 years old, and for most of my life, I considered myself pretty sharp. I taught mathematics at Jefferson High School for 34 years. I balanced budgets, managed investments, put the kids through college without loans. My wife, Margaret, used to joke that I could spot a bad deal from across the room. But Margaret died 6 years ago, and I learned that being smart with numbers doesn't protect you from being lonely. Before you go any further into this story, I need you to do something for me. I need you to subscribe to this channel. Not because I'm trying to make money off my mistakes, but because YouTube's algorithm is designed to bury stories like mine. Stories that warn you. Stories that could save your home. The scammers don't want you to see this. The criminals who prey on the elderly don't want their tactics exposed. So hit that subscribe button right now. Turn on notifications. Because if this video helps even one person avoid what I went through, then maybe something good can come from the worst year of my life. The house sits on a corner lot in Riverside, California. 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, a backyard with the lemon tree Margaret and I planted in 1985. We bought it in 1981 for $82,000. Today, it's worth close to $600,000. Every mortgage payment, every repair, every coat of paint represented years of our work, our dreams, our life together. After Margaret passed, the house felt too big and too quiet, but it was still mine. It was the last thing connecting me to her, to our children's childhoods, to the life we built. I was managing okay on my own. My pension covered the bills. My daughter Sarah lived in Portland with her family, and my son Michael was in Boston. They called regularly, visited when they could. But day to day, I was alone. The yard work became harder. My back wasn't what it used to be. The gutters needed cleaning. The fence needed painting. The garden Margaret loved so much was becoming overgrown. I tried hiring landscaping companies, but they were expensive, and frankly, most of them treated me like I was invisible the moment I wrote the check. That's when I met Danny Ortiz. It was a Saturday morning in March, 2023. I was outside, struggling with a stubborn rosebush that had grown wild over the winter. I heard a voice behind me. "Hey there, Mr. Chen, right? I'm Danny. I just moved into the apartment complex, down the street." He was young, maybe 35, with an easy smile and respectful manner that reminded me of my former students. He asked if I needed help with the bush. I said I was fine, but he insisted. Spent 20 minutes cutting it back properly, showed me the right technique. Wouldn't accept any payment. Said he was just being neighborly. That was the hook, though I didn't know it then. That's how it always starts. Danny started showing up every few weeks. Always he to help. Fixed a loose board on my porch. Helped me move some boxes to the garage. We'd talk about sports, about the neighborhood, about his job doing property management for a real estate company. He said he'd grown up with his grandmother raising him, that she'd taught him to respect his elders. He called me Mr. Chen, never Robert, always polite, always deferential. I started paying him for the bigger jobs. $50 to mow the lawn, $100 to paint the fence. He always protested, said I didn't need to pay him, but I insisted. It felt good to have someone reliable. Someone who showed up when they said they would. Someone who didn't treat me like a burden. By June, Danny was coming by once a week, sometimes twice. He'd bring me coffee from the shop on Main Street, the kind with extra cream the way I liked it. He'd ask about Margaret, listen to my stories, laugh at my old jokes. My daughter Sarah met him once during a visit. She seemed wary, asked me how much I was paying him, whether I'd checked his background. I told her she was being paranoid. Danny was a good kid. He was helping me. That's what I told myself every time that small voice in my head questioned something. The thing about manipulation is that it's gradual, imperceptible, like water wearing down stone. Danny never pushed, never asked for anything. He built trust brick by brick, conversation by conversation, favor by favor. And I was so grateful for the company, so relieved to have someone who seemed to genuinely care, that I ignored every single red flag. The first real shift happened in August. Danny showed up on a Tuesday afternoon looking stressed. Said he'd been fired from his job at the property management company. Some dispute with his boss over missing funds. He swore he was innocent, that they were using him as a scapegoat. He had tears in his eyes when he told me. Real tears, or what looked like real tears. Said he might lose his apartment, might have to move back to Arizona with his alcoholic father. He apologized for dumping his problems on me. I gave him $500 that day. Told him it was a loan, that he could pay me back when he got another job. He hugged me, called me the kindest man he'd ever met. Said I was like the grandfather he never had. 2 weeks later, he asked to borrow another $1,000. Said he found a new job, but needed money for a work vehicle. Showed me the job offer on his phone. It looked legitimate. I wrote the check. He promised to pay me back within a month. He never did. But by then, we'd moved past the point where money mattered. Danny had become part of my routine. He was the person I talked to most, more than my own children. He knew where I kept my spare key. He knew my schedule, my habits, my finances. He knew I had no mortgage, that the house was paid off, that it was my primary asset. He knew everything about me. And I knew almost nothing about him. September brought the real beginning of what I now understand was a carefully orchestrated plan. Danny came by on a Saturday morning with paperwork. Said his new job was going well, that he was managing several properties now. He wanted to thank me for helping him during his rough time. Said he had an opportunity that could help both of us. He'd found an investment property, a rental house in Moreno Valley that was being sold below market value. If we went in together as co-owners, we could flip it or rent it out, make significant profit. He'd handle all the management. I just need to be listed as co-owner for financing purposes. Banks looked more favorably on applications with someone who had established credit and property ownership. I should have said no immediately. I should have called my daughter. I should have consulted a lawyer. But Danny had an answer for every concern. He showed me comparable sales data, rental income projections, detailed business plans. He said we'd be 50-50 partners. Said this was his way of paying me back for believing in him. Said in 6 months, we'd both make $30,000 minimum. More than that, he made it seem like I'd be hurting his feelings if I didn't trust him. After everything we'd been through, after all the help he'd given me, didn't I believe he had my best interests at heart? The paperwork was extensive. Multiple documents, dense legal language, places marked with yellow tabs where I needed to sign. Danny sat with me at my kitchen table, the same table where Margaret and I had signed our own mortgage documents 42 years earlier. He walked me through each form deed of trust. Quitclaim documents, partnership agreements, financial disclosures, power of attorney for property management. It was overwhelming, but Danny was patient. Said it was all standard, that his lawyer had prepared everything, that we were protected. I signed. Every page, every yellow tab. 19 signatures in total. I didn't read most of it. That's the truth I'm most ashamed of. I trusted Danny more than I trusted my own judgment. The next Monday, Danny took me to a notary office, a woman named Lisa, who seemed to know him well. She verified my identification, watched me sign 3 more documents, stamped everything with her official seal. The whole process took 20 minutes. Danny seemed excited, energized. Said we were going to close on the Moreno Valley property within 2 weeks. Said he'd keep me updated on everything. I went home feeling good. Feeling like I was still capable of making smart business decisions. Feeling less alone. That was the day I signed away my house. I just didn't know it yet. For the next 3 weeks, everything seemed fine. Danny texted me updates about the investment property. Inspection scheduled. Financing approved. Closing date set. He was always positive, always enthusiastic. He came by twice to mow my lawn, brought me Chinese takeout one evening, sat with me watching a Dodgers game. Nothing felt wrong. Then, in early October, I received a letter from something called Western Title and Escrow Company. It was addressed to me, but referenced a property on Magnolia Street. I didn't own anything on Magnolia Street. The letter said closing documents had been recorded and that I should expect transfer of deed within 10 business days. There was a case number, a transaction ID, legal descriptions that meant nothing to me. I called Danny. He didn't answer. I texted him. No response for 6 hours. When he finally called back, his tone was different, less warm, more businesslike. He said the letter was just a formality, part of the investment property paperwork. Sighed I shouldn't worry about it. Said he'd explain everything when he saw me that weekend. But he didn't show up that weekend, or the next. My daughter Sarah called on a Tuesday evening. She'd been trying to reach me all day. Her voice was tight, controlled, the way it gets when she's trying not to panic. She said she'd received a call from someone at Chase Bank, where I'd had my accounts for 30 years. They were calling about unusual activity, large transfers, changes to account permissions. The bank representative had asked Sarah if she knew a Daniel Ortiz who was listed as power of attorney on my accounts. I felt something cold move through my chest. I told Sarah I didn't know what she was talking about. I'd never given Danny power of attorney over my bank accounts. The paperwork we'd signed was just for the investment property. Sarah's voice got very quiet. She asked me to read her exactly what Danny and I had signed, to find the documents and go through them line by line. I couldn't find my copies. I'd given them to Danny to file, he said. He had the originals. All I had was the letter from Western Title and Escrow. Sarah told me to hang up and call the police immediately, but I didn't. I called Danny instead, over an voicemail. I drove to the apartment complex, where he said he lived. The manager had never heard of Danny Ortiz. No one by that name had ever rented there. I drove back home and sat in my driveway for an hour, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. The next morning, I went to Chase Bank and asked to speak with a manager. A woman named Patricia brought me into a small office with glass walls. She looked at my identification, typed on her computer, and her expression changed. She asked me to wait, then came back with another manager and someone from their fraud department. They showed me my account history. 2 weeks earlier, on a date I clearly remembered spending at home watching television. There had been a wire transfer of $47,000 to an LLC called Riverside Property Holdings. The transfer authorization had my signature, a signature that looked exactly like mine. 3 days after that, another transfer, $22,000. Same LLC. There were also 3 new credit cards opened in my name. Total balances, $68,000. All maxed out. The fraud specialist asked me if I knew Daniel Ortiz. I said yes. He asked me what paperwork I'd signed with him. I tried to explain about the investment property, about the partnership, about how Danny was helping me. My voice sounded weak, unconvincing, like I was making excuses. The specialist left the room and came back with a folder. Inside were copies of documents I'd signed at the notary office. He spread them across the table. His finger pointed to specific paragraphs, specific clauses, specific legal language buried in the dense text. I hadn't signed partnership agreements. I'd signed quitclaim deeds, plural, not for property in Moreno Valley, for my property, my house, the house on the corner lot with the lemon tree. Margaret and I planted in 1985. I'd transferred ownership to Danny Ortiz and Riverside Property Holdings LLC. I'd given him power of attorney over my finances. I'd authorized him to make decisions about my property without my consent. I'd essentially given him my entire life. And it was all legal. Every signature was mine. Every document was properly notarized. Every form was filed with the county. The bank manager was explaining something about fraud protections and police reports and credit freezes. But I couldn't hear her anymore. There was a sound in my ears like rushing water. My vision was narrowing to a tunnel. I couldn't breathe properly. I asked them if this meant I no longer owned my house. The fraud specialist hesitated before answering. He said ownership was complicated, that quitclaim deeds transfer interest in property, but don't guarantee title. That there would need to be an investigation, that I should get a lawyer immediately. But the answer was yes. On paper, according to the county recorder's office, Danny Ortiz owned 50% of my house. And the way the power of attorney was written, he could make decisions about the other 50% without my approval. I drove home in a daze. I parked in my driveway and sat there looking at my house. My house, the house where I'd lived for 43 years, where Margaret died in our bedroom upstairs, where my children learned to walk, where every memory of my adult life existed, and it wasn't mine anymore. I need you to stop and do something for me right now. I need you to leave a comment below. Tell me if you've ever been approached by someone who seemed helpful, to friendly, to good to be true. Tell me if your parents or grandparents have mentioned someone new in their lives who's suddenly very involved. Tell me anything. Just tell me you're paying attention. Because what I'm about to tell you next, what happened over the following weeks, is going to sound impossible. It's going to sound like I'm exaggerating or making things up for views. I promise you I'm not. Every word of what comes next is true. And it gets so much worse before it gets better. That night, I finally called Sarah. I tried to explain everything calmly, but I couldn't stop my voice from shaking. She was on the next flight from Portland. Michael booked a flight from Boston. Both my children, who I'd raised to be independent and strong, were dropping everything to come save their father from his own stupidity. Sarah arrived first, late afternoon the next day. She hugged me at the door, and I broke down completely. 76 years old, and sobbing in my daughter's arms like a child. She didn't judge me, didn't say I told you so, just held me and said we'd figure it out together. We spent that evening gathering every document I could find. Bank statements, tax records, emails with Danny, text messages. The letter from Western Title and Escrow. It wasn't much. Danny had been careful. Most of our communication had been in person or over the phone. The paper trail was minimal, and what existed made me look like a willing participant in everything. Sarah made calls. First, to a real estate attorney named Robert Fitzgerald who her friend had used in a property dispute. His assistant said he was booked for 3 months, but Sarah insisted, explained the situation, and somehow got us an appointment for Monday morning. Then Sarah called the police. The Riverside Police Department non-emergency line. She explained that her father had been the victim of elder fraud, that someone had stolen his property through deception. The officer who took the report was sympathetic, but not encouraging. He said elder financial abuse was difficult to prosecute because victims often appeared to participate willingly. He said they'd open a case, but suggested we focus on civil remedies rather than criminal charges. Michael arrived that Friday night. My son, who'd inherited his mother's logical mind and steady temperament, sat us down at the kitchen table and created a spreadsheet. He documented every interaction I'd had with Danny, every payment I'd made, every conversation I could remember. He calculated total financial losses, the $1,500 in direct loans, the $47,000 and $22,000 wire transfers, the $68,000 in fraudulent credit card charges, $138,500. But the house was worth $600,000. If Danny successfully took full ownership and sold it, or if he forced a sale and took his half, I'd lose everything. Sarah was on her laptop, researching quitclaim deed fraud. She found articles about sophisticated scams targeting elderly homeowners, stories identical to mine. Friendly young person befriends isolated senior, gains trust over months, convinces them to sign documents supposedly for business partnerships or investments, actually transfers property ownership. By the time the victim realizes what happened, the property is sold or refinanced. The scammer disappears with hundreds of thousands of dollars. These scams were everywhere. Thousands of cases every year. Most never reported because victims were too ashamed. Success rate for recovery was less than 30%. Michael asked me if I'd had any contact with Danny since discovering the truth. I checked my phone. Danny hadn't responded to any of my calls or texts. His voicemail box was full. I tried calling from Sarah's phone, thinking he might answer an unknown number. It rang 4 times, then went to a different voicemail. A generic message, not Danny's voice. Sarah suggested we drive by the addresses Danny had given me. The apartment complex where he claimed to live. The office for the property management company where he said he worked. We went there Saturday morning, all 3 of us in Michael's rental car. The apartment complex manager remembered me from my previous visit. She pulled up her rental records on a tablet. No Danny Ortiz. No Daniel Ortiz. She even checked variations. Don Ortiz. Danny Ortega. Daniel Ortega. Nothing. She asked if I had a photo. I didn't. In all the months I'd known Danny, I'd never taken a picture with him. Never thought to. The property management company was actually real. A small office in a strip mall, sandwiched between a nail salon and a tax preparation service. But when we went inside and asked about Danny Ortiz, the receptionist looked confused. She checked their employee database. No one by that name had ever worked there. She called over the owner, a tired-looking man named Greg. He didn't recognize Danny from my description. Said they'd had problems recently with people impersonating their employees to run scams. Said we should report it to the police. We drove to the notary office next. The address was in an office building downtown. Suite 240, but when we got there, Suite 140 was vacant, empty, windows dusty. A commercial real estate sign taped to the door. Sarah took photos of everything. We went back to my house, and she added them to her growing file of evidence. Michael called the California Notary Commission to report Lisa, the notary, who'd witnessed my signatures. They said they'd investigate, but warned it could take months. We met with Robert Fitzgerald, the real estate attorney, first thing Monday morning. His office was in a high-rise with a view of the mountains. He was younger than I expected, maybe 4 to 5, with an intensity that made me both hopeful and nervous. We explained everything, showed him all our documentation. He listened without interrupting, taking notes on a yellow legal pad. When we finished, he leaned back in his chair and was quiet for a long moment. Then he said 3 words that made my stomach drop. "This is bad." He explained that quitclaim deeds are legal instruments that transfer whatever interest someone has in a property to someone else. They don't guarantee the transfer actually owns the property, but they do transfer their claim to it. Because I was the legitimate owner and had signed the quitclaim voluntarily, even if I was deceived about what I was signing, the transfer was legally valid. The power of attorney documents were even worse. They gave Danny authority to make financial and property decisions on my behalf. Combined with the quitclaim deed, he could potentially force a sale of the house, refinance it, or take other actions without my approval. Fitzgerald said our best option was to file a lawsuit immediately seeking to void the quitclaim deed based on fraud, undue influence, and elder abuse. We'd also need to file a lis pendens, a notice of pending litigation, on the property to prevent Danny from selling it while the case proceeded. We'd request a temporary restraining order preventing any further transfers or transactions, but litigation would take months, possibly years, and it was expensive. Fitzgerald's retainer was $15,000. Total costs could exceed $50,000 depending on how long the case dragged on, and whether Danny fought back with his own attorneys. I didn't have $50,000 anymore. Danny had taken most of my liquid savings. Michael said he'd loan me the money. Sarah agreed to split the cost with him. Both my children, who had their own mortgages and college funds and lives, were going to spend their savings to fix their father's mistakes. We filed everything that week: the lawsuit, the lis pendens, the motion for temporary restraining order. Fitzgerald also helped me file police reports with both Riverside Police and the FBI's Internet Crime Complaints Center. He said elder fraud cases sometimes got federal attention if the amounts were large enough. For 2 weeks, nothing happened. Danny didn't respond to the lawsuit. Couldn't be served papers because no one could find him. His phone was disconnected. The addresses we had were fake. Riverside Property Holdings LLC, the company he'd used for the wire transfers, was registered to a PO box that had been closed. Then in late October, I received a certified letter. The return address was a law office in Los Angeles. Inside was a response to our lawsuit from Danny's attorney, a man named Marcus Webb. The letter was aggressive, accusatory. It claimed I had knowingly and willingly entered into a business partnership with Mr. Ortiz. It claimed I had transferred property interest as my contribution to the partnership. It claimed I was now attempting to back out of my obligations because I'd changed my mind, and that constituted breach of contract. The letter included affidavits. One from the notary, Lisa, swearing she'd properly verified my identification and witnessed my voluntary signatures. One from someone claiming to be a witness to conversations where I'd discussed the partnership enthusiastically. One from an accountant who'd supposedly reviewed the business plan Danny and I had developed together. All lies, but all sworn statements, notarized and official. Fitzgerald said this was actually good news. It meant Danny was going to fight, which meant he was taking the lawsuit seriously. But it also meant this was going to be a long, expensive battle. The court hearing for the temporary restraining order was scheduled for mid-November. Fitzgerald prepared me for testimony, explained what questions the judge would ask, warned me that Danny's attorney would try to make me look senile, incompetent, or greedy, would suggest I was a willing participant who'd gotten cold feet. Michael and Sarah both took off work to attend the hearing with me. We sat in a courtroom that smelled like old wood and anxiety, waiting for our case to be called. When it finally was, I walked to the front on shaky legs. I had to raise my right hand and swear to tell the truth. Danny wasn't there, but his attorney, Marcus Webb, was. Tall, expensive suit, hair slicked back like an actor playing a lawyer in a movie. He had the confident smirk of someone who knew he was better at this than you were. The judge was a woman, probably 60, with reading glasses on a chain around her neck. She asked Fitzgerald to present our case. He did, efficiently and clearly, explained the pattern of manipulation, the deceptive documents, the power of attorney abuse, requested the TRO to prevent any property transactions while we litigated the underlying fraud claim. Then Webb stood up. He painted a completely different picture. Side, I was a lonely widower who'd befriended a young entrepreneur. That I'd been eager to invest in Danny's business ventures. That I'd signed everything knowingly and enthusiastically. That I was now having buyer's remorse and trying to use my age as an excuse to back out of legal obligations. He presented the affidavits. He presented bank records showing I'd written checks to Danny for yard work, proving we had an established business relationship. He even had emails I didn't remember sending, discussing property investment opportunities. The judge asked at me direct questions. Had I signed the documents voluntarily? Yes. Had anyone forced me? No. Did I read what I was signing? I hesitated. Said some of it, but not all of it. The judge's expression didn't change, but I saw something flicker in her eyes. She denied our motion for the temporary restraining order. Said there was a legitimate dispute about the nature of our business relationship and that it needed to be resolved through full litigation, not emergency orders. But she did grant the lis pendens, meaning the property couldn't be sold without court involvement. It wasn't a complete loss, Fitzgerald said afterward. But it wasn't the protection we'd hoped for. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay in my bed, Margaret's side empty like it had been for 6 years, and stared at the ceiling. The house settled around me with familiar creaks and sounds. I thought about every decision I'd made, every conversation with Danny, every signature. Every moment I'd ignored my instincts because I was lonely and wanted to believe someone cared. The next morning, I received another certified letter, this one from a different law office. It was a notice of eviction. Danny, through his attorney, was claiming his ownership interest entitled him to occupy the property. Since I was refusing to honor our partnership agreement, he was exercising his right to take possession of his asset. I had 30 days to vacate my own home. Sarah called Fitzgerald immediately. He said the eviction notice was aggressive but legally questionable given the pending litigation. We could fight it. But fighting everything was draining my children's resources. Michael had already taken an unpaid leave from work. Sarah was missing her daughter's school events, and I was losing my mind. I started having panic attacks. Waking up at 3 in the morning convinced I heard someone trying to break in, checking the locks constantly, looking over my shoulder every time I went outside. I'd spent my entire adult life feeling safe in this house. Now it felt like a trap. In early December, something shifted. Fitzgerald called me with news. The FBI had taken an interest in my case. Apparently, I wasn't Danny's only victim. They'd identified at least 3 other elderly property owners in Southern California who'd reported similar scams. Same pattern, same tactics, different names. But investigators believed it was the same person or crew operating across multiple counties. One victim had lost her condo in San Diego. Another had his ranch property in Temecula seized. A third had signed over rights to a commercial building in Ontario. Combined losses were over $2 million. The FBI was treating it as an organized elder fraud operation, possibly connected to larger financial crime networks. They wanted to interview me, wanted all my documentation, wanted to build a federal case. For the first time in months, I felt a spark of hope, not just for myself, but for justice. The FBI agents came to my house on a Tuesday afternoon. A man and a woman, both professional and thorough. They recorded our conversation, asked detailed questions about every interaction with Danny, showed me photographs of different men, asking if any were him. None were. They explained that professional scammers often use sophisticated identity theft and falsified documents, that Danny Ortiz might not even be his real name, that he probably had multiple aliases, multiple social security numbers, multiple lives running simultaneously. They also warned me that federal cases take time, that I shouldn't expect quick resolution, but they were building something. That's what they said. They were building a case that could take down an entire operation. Christmas came and went. My children stayed with me through the holidays. We tried to make it normal, but nothing was normal. I couldn't enjoy anything. Couldn't focus on conversations. Couldn't pretend everything would be okay. On December 28th, I received a phone call from a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Mr. Chen. The voice was familiar, casual, friendly. It was Danny. My hand started shaking so badly I nearly dropped the phone. I gestured frantically at Sarah to start recording on her phone. She grabbed it and held it near mine. "Danny," I said. My voice came out strangled. "Hey, Mr. Chen, listen, I've been thinking about everything that's happened. The lawyers, the lawsuits, all this crazy misunderstanding. I think we need to talk, just you and me. Work this out like reasonable people. Can we meet somewhere?" Every instinct screamed that this was a trap, but it was also the first real contact we'd had in months, the first chance to get answers, to understand why. "Where are you?" I asked. "Around. I've been dealing with some personal stuff. Family emergency. Had to leave town for a while. But I'm back now, and I want to make things right. Can you meet me tomorrow?" Say noon at the Starbucks on Market Street. Sarah was shaking her head violently. Michael had appeared in the doorway, his expression alarmed. "I'll think about it," I said. "Mr. Chen, I know you're mad. I know things got complicated, but we can fix this. I can fix this. Just give me a chance to explain everything face to face." "Please." He sounded sincere, remorseful, like the Danny I'd known before everything fell apart. I told him I'd let him know and hung up. Sarah immediately called Fitzgerald. He said, under no circumstances should I meet with Danny alone. If I was going to meet him at all, it should be in his office with attorneys present or with police involvement. Danny reaching out directly while litigation was pending was highly unusual and potentially dangerous. But I was tired of lawyers and judges and FBI agents. Tired of living in fear in my own home. Tired of not understanding why someone I trusted had destroyed my life. I wanted answers. That night, I made a decision that everyone told me was stupid. Michael said I was being reckless. Sarah said I was letting emotion override logic. Fitzgerald said I was jeopardizing our legal case. But none of them understood what it felt like to be me. To be 76 years old and betrayed by someone who felt like family. To have your entire sense of judgment, your entire sense of self, shattered. I called Danny back from Sarah's phone, the one he wouldn't recognize. He answered on the second ring. I told him I'd meet him. Tomorrow, noon, Starbucks on Market Street. But I didn't tell him everything, because I had a plan. And what happened at that meeting, what Danny revealed, what I discovered about who he really was and what he'd really done. That's when I finally learned the whole truth. That's when everything I thought I understood about this situation changed completely. That's when I realized the house, the money, the signatures. That was just the beginning. The Starbucks on Market Street sits in a strip mall between a dry cleaner and a cell phone repair shop. I arrived 15 minutes early, parked where I could see the entrance, and waited. Sarah and Michael had wanted to come with me, hidden somewhere nearby, but I'd refused. This needed to be just Danny and me. Or at least, that's what Danny needed to believe. What I hadn't told my children was that I'd called Fitzgerald first thing that morning. He'd contacted the FBI agents assigned to my case. They'd contacted Riverside Police. By the time I walked into that Starbucks, at 11:58, there were 3 undercover officers already inside. One reading a newspaper by the window, one on a laptop near the bathroom, one behind the counter in a Starbucks apron that didn't quite fit right. I also had a recording device in my jacket pocket. Fitzgerald had arranged it. Perfectly legal in California, as long as one party to the conversation consents. And I was definitely consenting. Danny arrived at 12:03. He walked in like he owned the place. Same confident stride, same easy smile. But something was different. His hair was shorter, darker. He'd grown a beard. He wore expensive-looking sunglasses that he didn't take off, even though we were indoors. And he was thinner, like he'd lost 15 or 20 pounds. He saw me and waved, the gesture casual and familiar, like we were old friends meeting for coffee, instead of scammer and victim meeting in the middle of active fraud litigation. Mr. Chen. He approached with his hand extended. I didn't take it. His smile faltered for just a second, then recovered. I understand. You're upset. Let me get us some coffee, and we can talk. I don't want coffee. Okay. He held up both hands in a placating gesture and slid into the chair across from me. I just want to explain some things. Clear up the misunderstandings. I said the word slowly, tasting how bitter it was. Is that what you call stealing my house? I didn't steal anything, Mr. Chen. We had a partnership agreement. I signed documents you told me were for an investment property in Moreno Valley. You lied about everything. Your job, where you lived, even your name, probably. Danny's jaw tightened. For a moment, I saw something flash behind his eyes. Something cold and calculating that had never been there before. Or maybe it had always been there, and I'd been too lonely to see it. My name is Danny Ortiz. That's the truth. And yes, maybe I simplified some things, made the paperwork seem easier than it was. But you're a smart man, Mr. Chen. You taught math for 34 years. Are you really going to sit here and tell me you didn't understand what you were signing? The victim blaming. Fitzgerald had warned me this would come. Scammers always turned it around, made you doubt your own memory, your own intelligence, your own culpability. Why did you target me? I asked. Why my house? Danny leaned back in his chair, studying me. Target you? Jesus, you make it sound like I'm some kind of criminal. I needed a business partner, with good credit and property equity. You needed companionship and purpose. It was mutually beneficial. Or it would have been if you hadn't gotten your kids involved and turned this into some federal case. You took $138,000 from my accounts. Investment capital, which you authorized, with forged signatures. Your signatures, Mr. Chen. Your hand. Your pen. The notary verified everything. He was so calm, so assured. Like he'd practiced this conversation 100 times. Like he knew exactly how to counter every accusation. I shifted tactics. Tell me about your other victims. The woman in San Diego, the man in Temecula, How many people have you done this to? Something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe, or calculation. I don't know what you're talking about. The FBI does. They've connected at least 3 other cases to you. Different names, same pattern, same tactics. Now Danny's smile disappeared completely. He leaned forward, his voice dropping low. You're recording this conversation, aren't you? I didn't answer. It doesn't matter, he continued. You can't prove anything. Every document is legal. Every signature is authentic. Every transaction was authorized. You think I'm stupid? You think I didn't plan for this? Then why did you call me? Why agree to meet? Danny was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice had changed. Less defensive, almost regretful. Because I actually liked you, Mr. Chen. That's the truth. You reminded me of my grandfather. He died when I was 12. Only person who ever gave a damn about me. And when I met you, when we started talking, there was a part of me that wished it could just be real. You know? Just an old guy and a young guy being friends. But it wasn't real. No, it wasn't. This is what I do. This is how I make money. And I'm good at it because I commit to the role. I become the person you need me to be. For you, I was the respectful grandson figure. For the woman in San Diego, I was the trustworthy financial advisor. For the guy in Temecula, I was the fellow veteran who understood his service. Different masks for different marks. The casual admission stunned me. He was confessing. Right there in a Starbucks, with undercover cops, listening to every word. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Danny pulled off his sunglasses. His eyes were tired, bloodshot. Not the eyes of the friendly young man who'd helped me with my rosebush 9 months ago. Because I'm leaving. Tonight. I have a flight out of Lax at 8 p.m. By tomorrow morning. I'll be in Mexico City with a new name and new documents. And you're never going to find me again. My heart was pounding. So this is goodbye? This is me offering you a deal. Drop the lawsuit. Tell the FBI you were mistaken about everything. Admit that you entered into the partnership willingly and things just didn't work out. I'll sign over my interest in your house. Clean transfer. You keep your property. I walk away. We both move on. And if I don't, then I force the sale of the house through the courts. My attorney is very good. Very expensive. He can drag this out for years. You'll spend every penny your kids have fighting me, and you'll probably still lose. Because the documentation is perfect, Mr. Chen. Perfect. And at the end of all that, you'll lose your house anyway. And you'll die knowing you destroyed your children's financial futures. For nothing. It was the cruelest thing he could have said, because it was probably true. I could see it playing out exactly as he described. Years of litigation, mounting legal fees. The stress and heartbreak of fighting a battle we might not win. My children bankrupting themselves to defend their foolish father's mistakes. Why would you give up your claim? I asked. If your documentation is so perfect, why not just take everything? Because the FBI is making this complicated. Because every day I stay in the country is a risk. Because $2 million from the other properties is enough. Your house is worth $600,000, but half of that is only $300,000, and liquidating it will take time I don't have. So I'm cutting my losses. He stood up. You have until 6 p.m. to decide. After that, I'm gone and the deal expires. Your attorney has my attorney's number. Work it out. He started to walk away, then turned back. For what it's worth. Mr. Chen, I am sorry. I know that doesn't mean much. But I am. Then he was gone, walking out into the bright December afternoon, leaving me, sitting alone at a Starbucks table with my entire life hanging in the balance. The undercover officer who'd been reading the newspaper came over, showed me his badge. Said they had everything on tape. Said Danny's admission was exactly what they needed. But when I asked if they could arrest him right now, prevent him from leaving the country, he got quiet. Said it was complicated. Said they needed to coordinate with federal prosecutors. Said it would take time. I called Fitzgerald from the parking lot. Told him everything Danny had said, everything he'd offered. Fitzgerald was quiet for a long time. Then he said something I didn't expect. Take the deal. What? Take the deal. Robert. Get your house back. Let him go. But he's confessed. The FBI has evidence. He's done this to other people, and the FBI will continue investigating. They'll build their case with or without you. But right now, today, you have a chance to get your property back without years of litigation. You have a chance to give your children their lives back. Don't let pride or revenge cost you everything. I sat in my car for 2 hours, engine off, phone in my hand. I called Sarah, told her about Danny's offer. She was silent for a long time. Then she said, "Dad, what do you want to do?" Not, what should I do? What did I want to do? I wanted my house back. I wanted to sleep through the night without panic attacks. I wanted my children to stop sacrificing their savings and time for my mistakes. I wanted to feel safe again. At 4:30 p.m., I called Fitzgerald and told him to accept the deal. By 6 p.m., Danny's attorney had sent over the paperwork. A full quitclaim deed returning all property interest to me. A statement releasing all financial claims. An agreement that I would not cooperate further with any criminal investigation into Mr. Ortiz and would retract my previous statements to law enforcement. I signed it. Fitzgerald witnessed it. We filed it with the county recorder immediately. Danny Ortiz disappeared that night. The FBI confirmed that someone matching his description boarded a flight to Mexico City using a passport with a different name. They had his photo from Starbucks security cameras. They had his confession on my recording. They had evidence connecting him to multiple fraud cases, but they didn't have him. The next 3 months were a special kind of hell. I had my house back legally, but I'd lost everything else. The $138,000 he'd stolen was gone. The credit card debts in my name were my responsibility. The emotional trauma was something I couldn't just sign away. I filed police reports. I filed disputes with the credit bureaus. I filed claims with my banks, fraud protection department. Every single entity I contacted told me the same thing, because I had signed documents authorizing the transactions. Because I had voluntarily given Danny access to my finances. Because I had a documented business, relationship with him, recovery would be difficult, if not impossible. The bank refunded some of the wire transfers under their fraud protection policy, about $32,000. The rest, they determined, was my responsibility because I'd authorized Danny as a power of attorney. The credit card companies were even less sympathetic. 3 of them sued me for the outstanding balances. I had to hire another attorney to negotiate settlements. In total, I recovered about $40,000 of the $138,000 stolen. The rest was just gone. Michael and Sarah had loaned me $25,000 for legal fees. I insisted on paying them back, but they refused. Said it was their responsibility to protect me. That logic was backward and it broke my heart, but they wouldn't budge. I started seeing a therapist in February. A woman named Dr. Patricia Ruiz, who specialized in trauma and elder abuse. She helped me understand that what Danny had done wasn't just theft. It was psychological manipulation, grooming. He'd identified my vulnerabilities and exploited them systematically. The loneliness after Margaret's death, the desire to feel useful and capable, the need for companionship. He'd studied me like a textbook and executed his plan perfectly. Dr. Ruiz also helped me understand that I needed to forgive myself. That being the victim of a sophisticated scam didn't make me stupid or weak. That thousands of people every year fell for similar schemes. That intelligence and education weren't shields against emotional manipulation. But understanding it intellectually and feeling it emotionally were different things. In March, I received a call from FBI agent Martinez, one of the agents who'd interviewed me. They'd tracked Dano City, then Los Chim, his trail Guadalajara. But they'd made progress on the larger investigation. They'd identified the crew he worked with, multiple people operating across California, Arizona, and Nevada, targeting elderly property owners with a coordinated system of identity theft, document fraud, and property transfer scams. They'd arrested 3 people so far. A notary named Lisa Chen, who'd notarized fraudulent documents for dozens of transactions. An attorney named Marcus Webb, who'd created the legal framework for the scams. And a woman named Patricia Rodriguez, who'd posed as a financial advisor and bank employee to various victims. None of them would give up Danny's real identity. They all claimed he was the mastermind, that they'd only met him a few times, that he operated under multiple aliases, and they didn't know his true name. But the FBI had frozen accounts linked to the operation. Over $4 million in assets scattered across various LLCs and offshore accounts. Agent Martinez said I'd likely see some recovery through victim restitution funds once the criminal cases were resolved. Maybe 30 to 40 cents on every dollar lost. But that process would take years. By April, I'd settled into a new kind of normal. I kept the house cleaner than Margaret and I ever had. I hired a legitimate landscaping company with verifiable business, licenses, and insurance. I had new locks installed. I joined a senior center and started going to their coffee meets twice a week. I was learning, slowly, how to live with what had happened. But I also changed in ways I didn't expect and didn't like. I was suspicious of everyone. When a neighbor offered to help me carry groceries, I said no thank you with my hand on my phone ready to call 911 when Sarah suggested I try a dating app for seniors. I laughed bitterly. Trust. I'd never trust anyone again. Dr. Ruiz said that was trauma talking. Said healing meant not letting Danny win by making me afraid of the world forever. Said isolation was exactly what scammers wanted because it made their next victim more vulnerable. In late May, something unexpected happened. I received a certified letter from a law office in San Diego. Inside was a check for $62,000. The letter explained that Patricia Rodriguez, the woman who'd posed as a financial advisor, had agreed to a plea deal. Part of her restitution involved liquidating assets and distributing funds to known victims. This was my share. I held that check for a long time. $62,000 didn't replace what I'd lost, didn't undo the trauma, didn't give me back the months of sleep I'd missed or the dignity I'd felt stripped away. But it was something. It was acknowledgement. It was a small piece of justice. I deposited the check, paid back Michael and Sarah for their legal fees, put the rest in a new account at a different bank with additional security measures, and I made a decision. I called Agent Martinez and told him I wanted to help, wanted to be part of their ongoing investigation, wanted to help train other agents on how these scams worked from the victim's perspective, wanted to do something good with what had happened to me. Agent Martinez connected me with a victim advocacy program. I started speaking at senior centers, community meetings, and financial literacy workshops. I told my story over and over. The embarrassment faded eventually, replaced by a sense of purpose. If I could help one person recognize the warning signs, If I could prevent one family from going through what mine had, then maybe Danny hadn't completely destroyed me. I learned that elder fraud is one of the fastest growing crimes in America. $5 billion stolen every year. Most cases never reported. Most perpetrators never caught. The shame victims feel keeps them silent. The complexity of the scams makes prosecution difficult. The legal system treats victims as complicit participants rather than targets of calculated manipulation. I also learned the warning signs I'd missed, the isolation tactics. Danny discouraged me from involving my children in our business dealings. He created urgency around every decision. He used affection and guilt to maintain control. He presented himself as the only person who truly understood me. He created a reality where questioning him felt like betraying a relationship. These are the tactics used by every elder scammer. Romance scammers, investment scammers, grandparent scammers, lottery scammers. They all follow similar patterns because the patterns work. In August, almost exactly 1 year after I'd signed those first documents, I received another call from Agent Martinez. They'd found Danny, not in Mexico, in Costa Rica, living under the name David Oa, running real estate investment seminars for American expats. Costa Rica doesn't have an extradition treaty with the United States for most financial crimes. Danny had chosen his refuge carefully. But Agent Martinez said they were working with Costa Rican authorities, building a case under international fraud statutes. It would take time, but there was a chance, a small chance. I thanked him and hung up, and I realized something important. I didn't need Danny to be caught for me to heal. I didn't need him in prison for me to move forward. Justice would be nice, but my recovery couldn't depend on it. I'd given Danny enough of my life. I wasn't giving him any more. In September, Sarah and her family came to visit. My granddaughter Emma, who was 7, wanted to help me plant new flowers in Margaret's garden. We spent a Saturday afternoon in the dirt, Emma chattering about school and friends and her new obsession with butterflies. She asked me why the garden had been so messy before. I told her sometimes when people are sad, they forget to take care of the things they love. She nodded seriously, like that made perfect sense, and said, "But now you're not sad anymore, so the flowers can grow again." Out of the mouths of children. That October, a year after the worst of it, I attended a victim support group meeting at the Riverside Community Center. 15 people, all elderly, all scammed in various ways. A woman named Joyce had lost her retirement savings to a romance scammer she'd met online. A man named Harold had wired $40,000 to someone claiming to be his grandson in legal trouble. A couple named Ruth and Jean had refinanced their home based on advice from a fake financial advisor and lost it to foreclosure. Everyone had a story. Everyone carried shame. Everyone felt stupid, but we weren't stupid. We were human. And humans are wired to trust, to connect, to believe the best in people. That's not a weakness. That's what makes us capable of love and friendship and community. The scammers exploit that. They weaponize our humanity against us. The group leader asked us what we'd learned, what we wanted others to know. I said this. I learned that loneliness makes you vulnerable in ways you don't recognize. That grief creates openings that predators can see. That intelligence doesn't protect you from emotional manipulation. And that shame keeps these crimes happening because victims stay silent. So the most important thing I can tell you is to talk about it. Tell your story. Warn others. Take the power away from the scammers by refusing to be ashamed. In November, Agent Martinez called with a final update. Costa Rica had agreed to deport David Ochoa/Danny Ortiz back to the United States to face federal fraud charges. He'd been arrested in San Jose and was being held pending extradition. The case would likely go to trial within 18 months. Martinez asked if I'd be willing to testify. I said yes, without hesitation. The trial happened in March of 2025, 14 months after my nightmare began. Danny was brought into the federal courthouse, in shackles, looking older and smaller than I remembered. His expensive confidence was gone, replaced by the hunched posture of someone who knew he'd lost. I testified for 3 hours, told the entire story from beginning to end. Danny's attorney tried to cross-examine me, tried to suggest I'd been a willing participant, but the prosecution had recordings, documents, testimony from other victims. The pattern was undeniable. The jury deliberated for 6 hours, found Danny guilty on 14 counts of elder fraud, wire fraud, identity theft, and organized criminal activity. The judge sentenced him to 12 years in federal prison and ordered restitution of $1.2 million to be split among 8 victims. I'd get maybe another $100,000 over the next decade as he paid the restitution from prison wages. It wouldn't be enough. It would never be enough. But it was something. After the sentencing, I stood outside the courthouse with Sarah and Michael. Michael asked me how I felt. I thought about it for a long time. Tired, I finally said, but free. That night, I slept through for the first time in over a year. Today, I'm 78 years old. I still live in the house, on the corner lot with the lemon tree. Margaret's garden is thriving again. I have coffee twice a week with a group of men from the senior center. I volunteer at the library on Thursdays. I call my children every Sunday evening and actually tell them the truth when they ask how I'm doing. I've spoken at 47 different events about elder fraud. I've helped train bank employees to recognize the warning signs. I've counseled dozens of other victims. I've turned the worst experience of my life into something that helps people. But I also carry scars. I'm more careful now, maybe too careful. I verify everything. I question everyone. I don't form attachments easily, Doctor. Ruiz says I'm still healing, that trauma changes you, that the goal isn't to go back to who I was before Danny, but to become someone new who carries the experience without being destroyed by it. Some days I'm that person. Some days I'm not. If you've watched this entire story, if you've made it this far, I need you to understand something crucial. This can happen to anyone. It doesn't matter how smart you are, how educated, how financially savvy. These scams work because they're designed by professionals who study human psychology and exploit universal needs for connection, purpose, and trust. The warning signs are always the same. Someone who seems too helpful too quickly. Someone who isolates you from family and friends. Someone who creates urgency around decisions. Someone who uses affection and guilt to maintain control. Someone who makes you feel like questioning them means betraying the relationship. If you see these signs in your own life, or in the lives of elderly people you care about, speak up, ask questions, get involved. Don't worry about seeming paranoid or overprotective. The embarrassment of being wrong is nothing compared to the devastation of being right too late. And if you are a victim, if you're watching this because something similar has happened to you, please hear this. It's not your fault. You're not stupid. You're not weak. You're human. And you deserve support, justice, and healing. Report it. To the police, to the FBI, to your bank, to Adult Protective Services. File complaints with every relevant agency, even if they say they can't help. Create a paper trail. Fight back. You might not win, but you might prevent the next victim talk about it. Tell your story. Refuse to carry shame for someone else's crimes. The silence is what lets these predators operate. Your voice is powerful. And get help, therapy, support groups, victim advocacy organizations. You don't have to heal alone. Before I end this, I want you to do something for me. I want you to hit the like button on this video. Not for me, but because YouTube's algorithm will show this to more people. More potential victims. More families who need to see the warning signs. I want you to leave a comment. Tell me if this story resonated with you. Tell me if you've seen similar patterns in your own life or in the lives of people you love. Tell me if you learned something that could protect you. The comments create community. They create awareness. They create change. I want you to subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications, because this isn't the only story. There are dozens more, hundreds more, and each one contains lessons that could save someone's life savings, their home, their sense of security. I want you to share this video. Send it to your parents, your grandparents, your elderly neighbors, your friends who work with seniors, your financial advisors and bank managers. Spread the knowledge. Make it harder for these scammers to operate in silence. And if you can, if this story moved you, consider supporting the organizations fighting elder fraud. The National Adult Protective Services Association, the FBI's Internet Crime Complaint Center, local victim advocacy groups. Your donation creates resources for investigation, prosecution, and victim support. I've put links to all these organizations in the description below. I spent 43 years building equity in my home. I spent 9 months losing almost everything to a man who saw my loneliness and turned it into opportunity. I spent the next year fighting to get back a piece of what was stolen. But I'm still here. I'm still standing. I'm still in my house with Margaret's lemon tree and the memories we made together. Danny Ortiz took a lot from me, but he didn't take everything, and he didn't win. Before you go, I have one last question for you. One ask myself every day, who in your life might brain row, who is lonely, who to spot, who makes financial decisions without family involvement, who might be the next target. Think about that person, reach out to them, check in on them, let them know they're not alone. Because connection, real connection, is the best defense against predators who exploit isolation. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Thank you for caring enough to see this story through to the end. My name is Chen. I'm 78 years old. I'm a survivor of elder fraud. And I'm telling you my story so you don't have to live your own. Stay safe. Stay connected. And never stop questioning.